I'm Thea. I'm the designer behind Threads by Thea, and this is the tutorial video for my box purse. In this tutorial video, I'll be going over what is included in the purse making kit, as well as the additional items that you'll need in order to construct the purse. We will be starting from step 5. However, I will be giving tips and tricks on how to get through steps 1 to 4. If you open your sewing kit, you should have a set of instructions, your selection of fabric, a piece of interfacing, a strap, the bag pattern, the flap closure pattern, a piece of felt, and 2 magnets. So what you will need to make the purse in the kit is a sewing machine. You're going to need an iron, and with that you'll need an ironing board or a surface to fuse your interfacing to your fabric for one of the bag pieces that you're going to have to cut out. I personally don't have an ironing board. I just put a really thick towel down on my table that I work on, and that's how I iron. You're also going to need scissors, ideally fabric scissors for cutting out your pieces. You'll also need either quilter's clips to keep your pattern pieces together as you're sewing, or a set of tailor needles. You're going to need something to mark out your pattern pieces in order to cut them out. So you can use tailor chalk, or you can use a marker or a pen, whatever you're most comfortable with. You're also going to need a hand stitching needle. I'm going to walk you through how to blanket stitch around the edge of the flap closure, as well as hand stitching the magnets into place on the pattern pieces. And with that, you're going to need your ideal thread color that you want to use for your purse. So in your instructions, it starts out by telling you to use your bag pattern and cut a piece from your interfacing. So your interfacing is that almost like sheer piece of material. There's like a gritty side that kind of feels like goosebumps almost. And then there's a softer side. So the gritty side is the glue side. This is the part you will be placing onto your fabric, and you'll be ironing from the soft side. Now, when you're ironing this down, in the instructions, it does say to follow manufacturer's instructions on which temperature to use. So for this particular interfacing, my iron that I have now, I put it on the cotton setting, and all I do is I press it in sections. I'm not guiding the iron over it. It's easier to fuse the interfacing to your fabric by just pressing it and leaving it for a couple seconds in different sections. And you could always just kind of like put your finger on one of the corners of the pieces, and if it lifts up, it's not fully fused. If it sticks, then it's fine. Every iron is different. I did have an older iron where when I put it around the cotton setting, it did melt the interfacing once. It was a really old iron though, so I would just cut like a small corner off of your interfacing and just fuse it to a piece of your fabric just to test it out with your iron. So when you are fusing it to your fabric, you're going to fuse it to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side of your fabric. The beautiful, colorful part is the right side of your fabric. That's what we want to show on your purse. So you're going to take the gritty side to the wrong side, place those together, and that's what you're fusing. Now, once that's done, you'll end up with a piece that looks like this, because you're going to cut out your bag pattern from your interface, fuse it to your fabric, and then cut around that piece to get this. Now on one end, you're gonna have your buttonhole marked, which is this little circle right here. You are not to ever cut that out from your bag piece or your flap closure. It is only cut out of the bag pattern so that you can mark it on your pieces. So you'll have that at one end, and at the other end, you're gonna have 2 small notches. So this little mark right here and this little mark right here. Because the pattern is basically constructed using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I only place a small mark with a pen, and I'm only cutting the smallest sliver out of it. If you cut too deep and you're sewing, that little cut is gonna show. So that is for the first and second step. From there, you're going to cut another bag pattern. Now this is just out of the fabric by itself. This is what we're going to put on the inside of the bag. So one thing to mention, for the outside of the bag, I did follow like a pretty symmetrical part of the textile pattern. So this is what's going to show on the outside. For the inside, because no one's really going to see it, it's not visible, I didn't really follow any pattern, and I just cut as close to the other piece that I cut, so I'm not wasting as much fabric. And then you have some left over to get creative with and do stuff. So in step 4, it does direct you to cut your bag flap closure from the leather. In the kits, these come pre-cut and with the holes pre-punched. That instruction is pretty much for when you're going to make another bag, so you know kind of what to follow. However, you will have to cut a piece out of the felt that comes with your kit. Like the bag pattern, you're only using that circle to trace and mark your magnet placement on this piece. You are not cutting it from this piece of material. So for the next step, step 5, it is talking about sewing the magnets onto your pattern pieces. That's where we start. Now in your kit, you most likely have these smaller magnets. However, it is possible that you have a little bit of a bigger magnet, depending on what I'm able to get for the kits at any given time. Your pattern pieces are traced by the smaller magnets. So that's the ones we're going to be using in the tutorial today. So to start, you're going to get your magnets. Now it's up to you if you want to keep them in these plastic compartments, plastic bags, sealants, whatever you want to call them. It's up to you if you want to keep them in here. I personally like to cut them out and then sew them, kind of get them sewn onto each of the pieces. So essentially what's happening is this is where your magnet placement would be. So we're placing the magnet over that circle. We're going to use another piece of material. So this can either be a leftover piece of your interfacing, a leftover piece of the felt, or a leftover piece of the fabric, and we're just placing it over and we're sewing around that magnet so it stays in place. This part that we're sewing on is later going to be hidden on the inside of this flap. So your bag will open like such, your magnet will be here, and it'll close like this. So one thing I want to clarify before we start, if you want to keep your magnet in this piece of plastic, that is totally fine. What you can do is just place your magnet over that circle, and all you're going to do is stitch around into the plastic. That's how you'll lay your magnet down onto the pattern piece. The only reason why I take mine out of the plastic is because I want the most magnetic attraction to be happening when my purse closes, and I don't want that extra layer of like material between the magnet pieces. So I am just gonna start by just cutting. For this part, I use regular scissors. If you are new to sewing and you do have fabric scissors, do not use them to cut anything aside from fabric. They will dull and ruin. So make sure to have regular scissors on hand. Now, this part is a little tricky to keep the magnet in the place of the circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that other magnet and put it on the other side, and it will keep it in place here and kind of be my guide to sewing. So with that piece of fabric, you could either use the interfacing, the fabric, or another piece of the felt. I'm going to use the fabric. Just going to place that over. You're also going to need some thread and your sewing needle. Now, if you're someone who sews or does hand stitching a lot, you probably know how to backstitch. So you can do that here to just tack this piece down over the magnet to keep it in place. Or you could just do a running in and out stitch and then just go twice around the magnet so that you have kind of like a complete seam. So just gonna double check that my magnet is in a good spot. It is. So it looks like this. That's on that side. And we are sewing it down on the side that has the marking for the magnet placement, because this will be hidden in between the leather piece and this piece. We don't want it to show on the outside. We want the outside to be the nice clean side. To start, if you want to just do a running stitch and just go in and out all the way around the magnet, that's totally cool. What I will do right now is I'll just give you a quick demo on how to do a back stitch. Okay, so what you're gonna do, you're gonna hold your fabric over that magnet piece. Right along the edge of the magnet piece, you're just gonna put your needle and thread right through. Now this is going to be the showing side of your flap, so we want the nicer side of the stitch on this side. So to start, we're just going about, I would say, maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch stitch length. Oops. So I don't know if you could see very well, but from there where my thread was pulled out, you're just going to run your needle back through to the other side and pull through. Okay. Now you're going to go again onto the next about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch forward along the edge of that magnet. Put your needle through and pull through. Now where this becomes a back stitch is we're going back to where we just did our other stitch. So you're putting your needle back in that part. And then on this side, you have that stitch there that you did. I don't know if you could see that well. You have that stitch that you just did right there. You're going to go ahead of it 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. So you're going to go through. Make sure not to get your thread tangled. And then you're just going back to that previous stitch. Now you're doing that all the way around your magnet. Now if this is too complicated or seems more time consuming to learn how to do it right now, that's totally fine. All you're gonna do is just go this way and this way and that way and this way and that way and this way, all the way around your magnet until it's just held in place. So once you're done that, we'll get back and I will show you how to tie off your thread. So if you are at the end, it should look something like this. So this is the side that will be visible on your bag, and this is the inside part that will be hidden. Now, if you know how to tie off your work, go ahead and tie it off. If you don't, all you're gonna do is wrap your fabric basically as if you're just gonna make a knot in it. And with this circle part, you can see you're gonna pull it until all the thread connects at the point of like touching your fabric, where your thread came out of the fabric. You're gonna place your finger down on it and you're just gonna pull, and it'll make a knot directly against your fabric. Now you're gonna do that 2 or 3 times. And then once you're done that, all you're gonna do is cut, put this needle to the side. If you still have a lot of thread on it, just leave the thread and tie it off at the end. We're gonna use it again to put the next magnet onto the bag portion. At this point, I like to take my fabric scissors and I just cut around the magnet so that there's not all kind of fabric sticking out. And I will see you at the next step when we put the next magnet onto the bag part. So for this next part, we're going to be sewing the second magnet onto your bag piece, and you're going to be using the magnet marking on your piece. Essentially, we're doing the same exact thing as we previously did, but we're going to be doing this on the bag now instead of the flap closure. So you're going to be sewing the magnet down from the interface side, and later on, this, once everything's put together, the stitching that's going to show will be on the outside of your bag. Now, if you cut your magnet out of that piece of plastic and you're using this method, it will be a little tricky to hold this in place because we don't have a third magnet to cover it from the other side. One important part I also want to mention, this is very, very crucial because we want to make sure that your bag can close at the end. You're going to place, so this is the good side. This is the side that is going to be visible once the bag is finished. So this will be your flap, the outside. This will be the inside portion of that piece. So we're going to place the right side of the bag to the right side of the flap. And you're going to put your magnet, see how this is kind of drifting away a little bit. So I want to switch it to the good side of the magnet part so I know that when I'm done my bag is going to close. Very, very important. So now essentially what you're doing is you're just placing your magnet over that. You're going to put your fabric, interfacing, felt, whatever you want to use on top. And you're going to do that same stitching method around, or if you just did the in and out kind of stitching, that's totally fine. You could do that too. So once you're done sewing your magnet to the bag piece, you're going to have these 2 pieces here. So again, this is the flat portion. This is the side that is going to show once the bag is fully done. And this is the fabric portion, and this is the stitching that's going to show once the bag is done. And this is what my inside looks like after it's finished. So the next step is we're going to be attaching these 2 pieces together. So this is, again, this is considered the wrong side of this piece, and this is the right side. So in the instructions, it tells you to put together wrong side to wrong side. Technically, there isn't necessarily a wrong side. to the leather piece. They do differ in shades just by a smidge. It's nothing too noticeable. It's possible you may see some pen marks from the tracing and cutting of these pieces. So if you want to use that as your wrong side so you don't see those marks in the end, totally go for it. But if you want to decide based on if you want like the very white side or the little bit creamy side, you can't really see it that great in this lighting, but in person you'll notice a slight difference. So for mine, I'm going to use the side that's marked with just a little bit of pen marks as the wrong side. So this is my wrong side, this is my wrong side. I'm placing these together. Now, if you have fabric clips or quilter's clips, I would use those for this portion. You could also use paper clips. I won't be using pins for this part to keep these pieces together because I don't want to tarnish or mark any part of the leather other than the holes that are already punched here. So I'm going to take my fabric clips and I'm just going to hold it in place like this. And you can put them all the way around if you want. I'm just going to put 3 at the top and then 1 just at the bottom by the magnet. So for this part, you are going to sew these pieces together just around the curved edges. So basically wherever there is already a stitching hole punched for you, that's where you're going to sew. Now, in my pattern, I do a blanket stitch along the edge, and this is because it keeps it nice and together. If you don't want to do that stitch, totally fine. You could do any other stitch if you know other ones. The kind of stitch that we just did to hold the magnet down, you could do that along the edge. It's totally up to you, but I will be demonstrating how to do the blanket stitch along the edge. Because we're doing a blanket stitch all the way around, you're going to want a good amount of thread. So I have a pretty long arm reach. If you have a shorter arm reach, give yourself maybe 3 arm lengths. I'm going to demonstrate though. So from the end of the thread, I'm going to pull and extend all the way to this shoulder, and I'm going to do this twice, and then I'm going to give myself about an extra half just to make it all the way around with enough thread to be able to tie off in the end. Now again, if you have a shorter arm reach, maybe give yourself 3 lengths, maybe 4, but do your best to just gauge how much you'll need to get all the way across or all the way around the closure piece. So I'm gonna start in this first stitch hole right here, and I'm gonna start with my needle going through on the back side in between the 2 pieces of fabric. So starting from the back side of the leather, I'm going to put my needle through and pull. I'm going to tuck the little tail end of my thread through there. I'm actually going to move this clip over. It's a little bit in the way. Okay. So now once I have it pulled through there, now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to go in from this side of the felt piece. So putting my needle in there and then coming up through that same hole. Just move my thread around so it doesn't get tangled. I'm going to pull through. Now for this part too, on the purses that I do sell, I use sinew for this portion. I just like the way it looks with or against the leather. It's totally up to you what you want to use. But for this tutorial, I will use thread. I know maybe most people don't have sinew on them, but I will be using thread for this part. So now, it's just gonna wrap around the edge of the fabric here, or the material. So now to get the blanket stitch going, I'm gonna put my needle through this loop. So I pulled mine tight. Typically you want to do this part when it's a little bit loose, and that's what we're gonna start doing for the rest of the blanket stitch. But I'm putting my needle just under and through that loop. And I'm gonna pull my thread through. Of course, it's gonna get tangled. I just fix this. There we go. Let me fix this thread so that doesn't keep happening. Okay. So now I have this. So now what I'm doing, I'm going to put my needle through the next hole, and I'm going through both pieces of fabric now. We only went through the single piece of material at the beginning. That was just to start. So I'm going to pull through. And before I pull the thread all the way through, I'm going to put my needle and thread through that loop. And then pull. And you don't have to pull super tight, just tight enough to keep the fabrics together. Now your first stitch is going to look like this. We're going to move on to the next stitch. Same thing, going through that third hole, putting the needle through. And before pulling the thread all the way, we're going to go into that loop and pull. And making sure these are nice and even. So now the rest of your stitches are going to sit kind of like a square all the way around. So it'll be like this, and then that top thread is just going to sit along the edge of the two pieces of fabric. So I'll do that a few more times for you. Of course, these clips are getting in the way. This is my first tutorial, so be patient. And if you ever see that like it's pulling too tight like this, just loosen up that loop a little and then just pull your thread in the direction so that it squares itself off. So now again, going into this next hole. And again, before I pull that loop all the way tight, I'm going to put my needle right in there and pull my thread. It's going to start squaring off like this, so I'll do another last one. Going into that next hole. Pulling my thread. Before I pull it all the way through, I'm going to put my needle right through the loop and pull. And if you're if these threads aren't perfectly square, before you keep going, you can kind of loosen them up, straighten them all out, and then continue on. So you're going to do this all the way around, all the way to this side. Now the holes, these hole punches up at the top are going to be hidden technically inside the seam. For the first one, it's just my preference that I always like to start with the tail end of my thread in between. But on your last one, you don't have to worry about that. Whichever side your thread finishes at, you could just tie it off there, snip it, and then we're gonna put this piece to the side before we move on. So now that you're done sewing your two closure pieces together, it should look something like this. Now this edge you're leaving just open. This will all get sewn into the bag part after. But your blanket stitch should look something like this, so it just sits along, all the way along the edge. Like I said, you can use any kind of stitch. If you're a hand stitcher and you have preferences on what you like to do, totally go for it. I just like this stitch. It gives like a very cute, like traditional old crafty vibe to it, and yeah, I just prefer this one. It's very cute, and in my workshops it is an easier stitch to teach people how to do. So now that we're done with this piece, we're going to set it to the side and we are going to move along to sewing the bag portion together. Okay, so I'm at my machine. I'm starting off with the outer shell portion of the purse. So that's the part that has the interfacing on it and the magnet. So what I'm doing is just folding it in half. Now this is your piece here. This is the bottom part of your purse, and this portion is the top with your two notches. What I'm doing is I'm just going to be putting my fabric clips along the side seams. And I'm going to be doing this for both sides. So the bottom part of your bag should have this 90-degree angle on it. Now when we're sewing this, all we're sewing is from this end to this end, that's it. It's going to be sewn at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you are knowledgeable and know how to use a machine and sew often, you could probably start now. You're going to sew just along this side seam and then along this side seam, and you'll go ahead and continue on to your lining portion where you'll do the same thing and only sew the side seams closed for now. So once you're ready to start sewing, you can start from either corner, either the top or the bottom. It doesn't matter as long as you're doing your back stitch at the beginning and the end of every single seam. So you're going to be sewing this side seam, this one here, and then you're going to be doing the same thing for your lining piece. Once those are done, we're going to move on to the next step, which would be closing out this bottom 90-degree angle corner. Okay, so now that you've sewn together the shell of the bag and the lining of the bag, you'll have two pieces that look like this. So this is my lining part, and this is the outer shell part. So this portion is the bottom of the bag where these open corners are, and this is the top of the bag. So we're going to close up these corners here. Now, for this part, it's totally up to you if you want to press the seam. We're going to be opening the seam, open face. We're not pressing it to one side. So this is where the stitch is. This is your seam, and then this inside portion here is your seam allowance. So what we're doing is we're going to sew the seam down open face. So you're going to open it up like this, and then we are pinching this corner. Let me get in there this way. We're pinching this corner closed like this. So you're going to pinch the corner just like that, and then you're going to sew it down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it'll look like this shape. So once you have all of the corners closed, this is the lining part that I'm showing you now. It will look like this. So each of the bottom corners of your purse are going to look like this. This is the outer shell portion. This is the other side. So it'll look like that. So we're starting to get the shape of the bag now. It is coming along. So now we're gonna flip the outer shell part, so the part that has the interfacing and the magnet. We're gonna flip it right side out. Now the little notches that you cut earlier in the process, those are gonna come into play now. So we're gonna find those notches and we're gonna use those as guides for attaching our bag strap as well as the closure portion. So you'll get your bag strap. You should have a strap that is about 1 meter in length. I'm just using what I have left over in my studio, so mine's a little shorter. You can adjust your strap if you want it shorter. If you do want a longer one, you can get your own strap, or you could get crafty and use the leftovers from the fabric that you use to cut the bag and make a strap that way. But for now, I'm going to show you how to attach this. So where your notches are, there's a notch here and there's a notch here. We're going to be attaching the strap from the outside because this top seam is eventually going to be folded in and hidden on the inside of the entire purse. So your 2 notches are on this back side. You're placing one end of your strap on the inside edge of your notch. So your notch sits here, your strap is going on this side. So I'm going to put a clip there, hold it in place. Now I'm going to do the other end of the strap with the other notch. It's important at this part that your strap is laying essentially flat, that there's no like twists in it or anything. So now at the second notch is right here. I'm placing the strap on the inside of that notch. So I'm going to put a clip there. So your strap sits on the inside. So your notches are on these parts right here, and your strap edges are sitting on the inside edges of where those notches are placed. Now you're going to sew these down at 1/4 inch. For this part, it's up to you if you don't want to do a back stitch, because in a minute we're going to be tacking down the flap piece as well over this, so you could just put a stitch kind of in place just to hold it down for when we do the closure flap portion. So go and sew this down, and then I will meet you back at the next step. Okay, so once you have your strap sewn down at the notches, it will look something like this. And the next part is we're going to be attaching the closure. So because this is the right side of the bag, we're going to match it up with the right side of the flap closure. And all you're going to do is place it directly over your bag strap, matching the corner of the strap to the corner of the closure. And you're going to take your pins or your clips and just hold this in place. Because this is a leather piece and it's a little bit thicker, I don't do a back stitch on this part. I just do a running stitch just to hold it in place, because we're going to be sewing over it again to attach the lining. So at this part, I would switch to a leather needle on your machine. If you sew with leather a lot and you know you have your own techniques and ways of doing it, go for it. You're just sewing from this end to this end at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. No back stitch. You're just using this stitch just to keep it in place. So if your machine is not necessarily meant to handle material like this, you can hand stitch it. I will suggest that you use a Glover needle, which is a leather needle, and just do your best to kind of just sew it in place at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When we get to attaching the lining to the shell portion, if you are hand stitching the leather part, I would suggest just hand stitching the leather part completely shut for that portion, and then using your machine to do the rest of the stitching. So go ahead and get this part tacked down, and I will meet you back at the next step. To sew down the lining is we're going to take our lining piece. Now, because we didn't attach any magnet to the lining piece, there is no right way for like which side is the front and which side is the back. But we will use the side seams here as indicators on how we're going to match it up to the shell piece. So we're going to take this whole shell piece, we're going to fold this up, and we're going to put it inside the lining, like as if we're putting one bag inside of another. Now what I'm going to do here is where the inside seam sits on one side of the purse, like we did at the bottom, I'm going to open the seam. The same thing for the outside part. I'm going to open the seam, and I'm going to align those seams against each other. So we're going to start with one side. I'm going to add a clip or a pin, whatever you prefer, and then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. So I always start with this just so I could get the lining or the lineup of the bag right, because we're not following any notches, which you can do that because you have the 2 notches on the back side of your bag pieces, so you can mark the notches on the lining and then line it up to the edge of where your strap and flap closure line up. So I'm going to put a clip on this side. And then I'm just lining up the edges of the fabric so they're nice and flush. And I'm going to put a pin or a clip back here. And another one back here. And then one right in the middle. Now for the front part, we want to leave a small opening, about 2 to 3 inches wide, because we're going to pull the whole part that we're tucking inside out and then kind of fold it back into itself, which you'll see at the next step. You just gotta trust the process. So I'm gonna put a pin here, or a clip, sorry, and another clip just here. Now usually I'll put 2 pins at the beginning and the end so I know when to stop, but for this part I'm just gonna wing it and just remind myself and remember that this is where I'm starting, this is where I'm ending. So you're sewing from one clip or pin all the way around, and you're ending here. Now you are going to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end of this seam. If you did decide to hand sew the leather portion onto your bag, I would do a back stitch from this first clip just around to the side, finish off with a back stitch just up to the edge of where your leather closure and strap line up. And then you're going to do the same thing. So from one clip, back stitch just to the edge of your closure and strap, back stitch, and then you can hand stitch this portion in. For this part, we are using a 3/8 seam allowance, no longer a quarter. So this seam that you see along your shell piece that we just sewed, for your closure, it will be hidden completely on the inside of your bag. Okay, so once you have them sewn together, it should look something like this. I did end up leaving by accident about an extra inch of open space in this part where we're going to be pulling the bag back through itself. So yeah, you should have a seam that starts and goes all the way around and then ends back here in the front. So this part is can be stressful, but don't worry, nothing terrible is gonna happen. I always start, like, I'll just start basically pulling the strap through. Any pieces that are kind of letting themselves through, I will pull. And then this part here that's inside out, you also want to also flip that through. So everything after this point should be the right side out. So this is the lining part. I'm just putting my hand through that hole and just kind of straightening out these corners. I'm going to do the same thing for the shell portion, just straighten out the corners. So now you should have something that looks like this. So what we're gonna do at this part, so this is the lining portion, this bottom half is the shell, outer shell portion, and all you're gonna do is push it inside, straighten out those bottom corners again as best as you can. And then now for this part, it's up to you if you want to take it to your iron and iron down these edges, because we want these to be nice and straight. Personally, I am not about to do that, but I'm just gonna kind of pinch them all along with my hand and just get them as flat as possible. So I'm gonna do that all the way around. I'm even gonna just like pull these. I know I can't put like a pin or like a clip anything back here, but I'm gonna do my best to flatten it, because once I clip everything down and the seams are all aligned, I'm going to go around it one last time, and we're gonna do a top stitch all the way around so that everything stays nice and flat, and so that this part right here, we want to close this up. So if you do a lot of hand stitching, you probably know how to do a slip stitch to close this up nicely. If you don't, that's okay. You're just gonna flatten the two ends of that opening out here, and then it should kind of fold in on itself, and all you're gonna do is pin or clip that in place and then sew it down so it stays closed. Okay, so now that you're done closing up the edge, you're so close to finishing. So you should have a bag, basically. We are one step away. Some people do skip this next step. It does, to beginner sewers, feel a little daunting. However, I do call it a box purse specifically because of the next step, because it does get a very box shape. And when it closes, if you skip the next step, your bag closes with kind of these like outer edges that stick out, which, I mean, it's fine if you like that, but for the purpose of this tutorial, we don't want that. So this is your purse. You should have a top stitch along the edges, and it should also be going over the back of the bag strap and flap closure. So for this next step, we're gonna square out the purse, so I want to really push down and align those corners on the inside, this part and this part on the inside. And then this is a little tricky. I believe the instructions I wrote a 1/4 inch seam allowance or top stitch for this part. Now, for beginner sewers that want to take this on, I do recommend that. It just gives you more leeway. I don't expect your lines to be completely straight, so that seam allowance gives you a lot of leeway just to kind of make it from this corner all the way to the top corner. But the way I do it is I'm just doing a sliver. I'm basically stitching along the edge of where I'm about to make this tiny little fold. It can be anywhere from like just along the edge to 1/8 of an inch. So what I want to do is I'm putting my hand on the inside of the bag. Now with this part of my hand, I'm kind of holding it up against this from where this corner is. So I'm thinking of the side of the purse as a box. So from this corner, this is the center seam, and this is one corner, this is the other corner. And so I want to kind of pinch the fabric together and sew up from this corner all the way to the top so that it's all nice and even and proportionate. And I'm doing that for this side and this side. So what I'm going to do is with the edge of my hand, I'm just putting my index finger right in that corner seam, and I'm just gonna pinch it. Where are my pins? I'm gonna put a pin down. Now with my hand on the inside again, I'm just pinching the fabric together. And I'm eyeballing this, so I'm looking at the fabric. And I guess this is good too, that there is a symmetrical print on this fabric, so I can kind of align it so that the symmetry of the print is aligned with where I'm about to sew. Now I'm also putting my hand on the inside and just holding both fabrics together because I want to do my best to sew down both fabrics, so on the inside of the purse you also see a nice seam in there. It's okay if you don't catch both fabrics, it's not a huge deal. So that looks pretty good. So it should be something like this. So you see right there is my center seam. And now along this edge, I'm gonna sew just a sliver, like I said, about 1/8 of an inch to just an edge stitch. If you're a beginner sewer and you wanna take this on, I love that. You're gonna do your best to stay within a 1/4 inch seam allowance from this folded corner to the inside. And where you're gonna sew is you're sewing from this top corner or either end, it doesn't matter where you're starting from, but you're sewing from one corner just to the corner of where that bottom seam is, where we closed up that 90-degree angle at the bottom of the bag. You're not sewing all the way down here because then it's gonna be able to sit like a square. So you're just sewing from one corner to the next, and you're gonna do that for all 4 corners of the bag. Once you're done that, the purse is pretty much finished, but I will meet you at the end once that is complete. So once you've completed that last step, you've now made your own Threads by Thea box purse. So this is the one that I finished. So these corners should look like this. I think I said 1/8 of an inch in the previous clip about the last step. What I meant was a 1/16 of an inch, close to an edge stitch. So should be just a tiny little seam just on all of the corners, from this corner to this corner. Same thing for this side. So now you have your purse. So your magnet, if you did it right, it should be able to just connect like that. What I like to do once it's done is I kind of like press it out, almost like a paper bag closes. So I'll just like fold these corners here, and then I'll go down and I'll fold the other corners like that. And yeah, that's your purse. So I have had people in my workshops previously where they go the extra mile to make it like really boxy, and they will do this same edge technique and they'll do it along these bottom corners. And so it just makes it extra boxy. So that is optional if you would like to do that. But otherwise, thank you for following along in this tutorial. I would love to see the end result of all the bags that you guys are making. So leave a photo in the comments or tag me on Instagram at Threads by Thea. I also facilitate workshops for these purses. So if you know an organization, work for an organization, a community, a school, a staff, and you'd like to bring me in to facilitate a sewing workshop for you, just send me an email at threadsbythea@gmail.com, and put in the subject line inquiry for sewing lessons. I do a variety of other sewing workshops as well, so I can send you my package with all the details. Lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Rainy Chief Trading Post for the fabric. That's where I got my fabric. I love all the designs that they do, the textile work that they do, and the kits that you find from me either at workshops or on my website. They are done with fabrics from that location in Calgary. So I just want to give them a shout out. And yeah, thank you for following along again. And I hope to bring you guys another tutorial video for something in the future. Thank you.